Hey Bookaholics, welcome back to another reading vlog. Today's reading vlog is for Blackathon. I participate in Blackathon pretty much every year, but I just do it my own way because I'm a menace. But I always love celebrating Black History Month, and I think this year above all years it's super important. Thanks a lot Google for trying to make us forget. I think it's a really important thing to celebrate anytime, but at the moment with the political climate, it's really important to be uplifting marginalised voices. So I have decided that I couldn't decide. I had loads of different ideas for what to do with the week that I dedicate to Blackathon. So I figured that instead of trying to pick out from all of the ideas that I had, I was going to take it out of my own hands. So this week we are reintroducing the spinner wheel. So in the three pots that I have today, we have the Comfort Zone pot, which is basically speculative fiction written by Black authors. These are all going to be either standalones or series that are not out in their entirety, and I'm only reading one book from. Then we have the series pot. I have two series in here. There is only one series marker on here instead of three. So there are four of the others and then one series one, because obviously I don't think I'm going to be able to read more than one series in a week. And then we have my out of my comfort zone, which is books that are from other genres like literary fiction, romance, just not my typical genres. So as I said, we have one series on here. Both series in here are duologies, so it is still doable within the week. And then I have coffee and marshmallows for in my comfort zone because they're like cozy. And then I have the ones that are out of my comfort zone, which are books and the light bulb and the phone. We'll see what we land on, and we'll see what our first read is, shall we? Out of my comfort zone. All right, let's go see what we get. And we have Love by Toni Morrison. A different day, but I'm back in the same spot because we need to spin again because I have finished Love by Toni Morrison. This is the story of two women who, well, it's got multiple perspectives, but mostly two women who are named Christine and Heed. It's about their relationship with a man named Bill Cozy. Bill was a British man who had a hotel for upper class African Americans prior to the civil rights movement. And basically, Bill passed away, and we have these two women who hate each other. Christine is Bill's granddaughter through his deceased son. And we also have Heed, who is the child that he married. They are the same age, and he was 11 when Bill married her, which made me feel more than slightly sick. But we also get it from the perspectives of May, Junior, Vida, Elle. There are other perspectives that also talk about Bill. And Bill was this rich man who, until the civil rights movement, which then dwindled his economy, and the hotel eventually had to close in the 80s. In the years that follow, we are following these two women who now both live in the hotel and claim ownership of it and hate each other because they believe that they get in each other's way. They both believe that they are entitled to his wealth because his will is very ambiguous. We're following this story as they begin to dissect and pull apart their relationship with Bill, the idea that he was arguably not a good person, but they both love him anyway, and all the other people that were also in Bill's life and their perceptions of him now that he is gone. It's not told in a linear and chronological way, which also was fascinating. And we also have, as I said, discussions vaguely around the civil rights movement and the impact that had on another aspect of society, which is businesses, which is not something that you think about very often. But a lot of Black-owned businesses ended up suffering because a lot of Black people were now allowed into white spaces, but white people still weren't going into Black spaces. So that was a very interesting insight, and it wasn't one that was done with judgment at all. It was simply one that stated it as though, you know, this is factual, which was fascinating. I love Toni Morrison's writing style. I will never be able to get enough of this woman's writing style. She is amazing. This was so short, and yet it had so many conversations to have. We have child marriage and trauma, familial trauma, generational trauma, racial trauma, societal trauma, So many things going on and so many discussions to be had, and I absolutely loved it. As I said, there are moments in here that are absolutely sickening. There are things in here that are emotionally devastating. I really like that Bill's never pitched as a monster. It's never he's this horrible, despicable man. And I really like that it didn't show him as this all ethereal evil being. He was a human who was a piece of shit, which I appreciated. Very short book, but lots of thoughts. And if you're looking for a Toni Morrison book and you're not sure and you kind of want to just dip your toes into her writing style, it won't take you very long if this is one that you decide to give a go. So, first book down, let's go spin. All right, Comfort Zone. What do we have? Ooh, got two. Oops. We have Far from the Light of Heaven by Tade Thompson. All right. Let's get that. So our next spin gave us Far from the Light of Heaven by Tade Thompson. This will be my first Tade Thompson, which I'm very, very excited about. And this one is following the colony ship Ragtime, which docks in the Lagos system. And it has traveled light years to be able to get 1,000 sleeping souls to this new colony planet. However, when the first mate happens to wake up, they realize that a load of the souls are never going to wake up, that they have died in transit. So then ensues a investigation into the cause of these deaths, and it leads to unraveling a very wide-spanning mystery from the Lagos station to the colony planet Bloodroot to the far-flung systems and indeed Earth itself. So I'm very excited for this. I'm very excited to get into a Tade Thompson. This is one that it doesn't look like it's the shortest book in the world. It's only 351 pages, but also the font is huge. You could read that from space. So I don't think this is going to take me very long to read either, and I'm really in the mood for some more speculative stuff. So hopefully this will definitely hit that spot. I'm very excited for this. I do have his Wormwood trilogy as well, so I'm really hoping I love this. Then it makes me all the more excited to get into the Wormwood trilogy later on. I think with this one, because it's speculative and because it's a little bit longer, I might have a bit more to say. So I'll probably try and check in at the halfway point. I'll see how I'm faring. Hey vlog, it is Wednesday night, so I thought I needed to check in again. I thought I would be able to check in a lot sooner with this because the font is huge and it's super easy to get through. I've got family over, so I've just been like super busy, which is lovely, but it does mean that I get a little bit less time for reading. I am now halfway through Far from the Light of Heaven. I am having such a good time. This was one that I wanted to pick up because I've always really vibed with Afrofuturism. It's a subgenre that for some reason I really like. I like the conversations that are being had in it most of the time. I feel like it's a really interesting space that oftentimes tackles things that within your typical sci-fi, your typical fantasy are worn thin, somehow feel really unique and innovative in Afrofuturism. Octavia Butler would be a prime example, N.K. Jemisin, Nnedi Okorafor. So naturally I wanted to pick this up, and I have been proven right because there are so many things about the actual setup of this book that I think had I read it within like the typical trappings of the genre, I would have found boring. There are so many things in here that I have seen done countless times. This is a murder mystery on a ship in space. You have a faulty AI, you have the creepy factor, you have the investigation, you have the settlers in hypersleep. There are so many things in here that just get done time and time again within space operas. And yet in here we have it framed in a way that's still interesting. We had a very brief encounter with this AI that goes faulty. We had a very brief encounter with it at the very beginning of the book. About 50 pages later, you know something is up. So you see this AI and then you don't see it again for 50 pages and then you know something is up. That's how good of a writing it is. This AI has one conversation with one of our protagonists. One. And you know something is up when you come back to them. That to me is awesome. We have this other character who has been suspended from their job and therefore are being kind of commissioned to take on this other job. And if they do, they will get reinstated. We are at the beginning unsure why they have been fired, why they have been, well, they've not been fired, they've been put on administrative leave. We don't know why. And he is normally a detective on this colony planet that we have. The colony planet in and of itself is really interesting, and I'll get to that in a moment. But he is an investigator on this colony planet. Then he is sent to go investigate what happened on the ship because the government don't want to touch it. So many things already in this first half. We have had discussions around where Earth is at, discussions around like space travel, including one of our protagonists' father went into space and has never been heard from again. The relationships that this protagonist has with their family was also awesome. Everything around Shell so far has been, so we have two protagonists. We have Shell and we have Rashid. Shell is the astronaut that is from Earth, and we have discussions around her training, around why she would be the one that would be plucked out of obscurity to drive this ship, how well trained she is, etc. Discussions around corporate greed, discussions around how Earth is functioning. Then we have Rashid, who is on the colony called Bloodroot. Rashid, as I said, is an investigator. His relationship with his mentor and other peers is also very interesting for the tiny bit that we get. And we also have, so Bloodroot is a fascinating planet because it is the second colony. Humans went to the first colony and it failed. We did the same thing we did on Earth, drained it of all its resources, and then corporate greed took over and ruined the planet. So Bloodroot is built on the principle of coexisting with its ecosystem, of not draining the planet of its resources. So already you have these different ideologies, these different political systems. The distrust, in a way, that Earth and Bloodroot have for each other is also fascinating. The kind of protocols that are necessary to be able to enter into the colony, all of these things, absolutely fascinating. Then on top of that, we have these really fascinating characters that clearly have a lot more story to them that we will learn throughout the story. Then you bring in the AI. So we have the first AI that we're introduced to, which is Ragtime, which is the name of the ship. It is the captain of the ship, and Ragtime is there to literally pilot the entire ship, the entire course from Earth to Bloodroot. And you have Ragtime as having somewhat of a personality, being an interesting AI. And again, you get one conversation between Shell and Ragtime. And then after that, you have Salvo, who is the AI companion of Rashid's, who is there to help him with protocols and also with the investigation. And Salvo, so sometimes you'll get the perspective from Shell or from Rashid, or sometimes you will get it from the AI. So for example, Shell, there's also the backup AI. So the main AI of the ship has malfunction. And now we have the backup AI, who is definitely not as competent. So that's fascinating as well, that you have like different layers of AI. And we have the backup AI sometimes observing Shell, and we have Salvo sometimes observing Rashid. So you have all of these dynamics going on and the different ways that characters perceive what they're doing and why they're doing it, and all of this cultural background differences. And it is so layered that the murder mystery I have barely mentioned. We have a horrific murder happen. We have several sleeping passengers on this ship that have been brutally murdered and like dismembered. And that's what's fascinating to me. I kind of was thinking it'd be like faulty AI with, there being some kind of overhaul. And it's just that, they shut down the hypersleep and these people like died in their sleep and they're trying to figure out who shut it off. No, like it's actual murder, like with violence. I'm interested in the murder mystery, but that's nowhere near the most interesting thing. The characters, the conversations, the themes, the social critique, that is what I am here for. If I don't find out what actually happened to these people, obviously I'd be a bit like, oh, that's a shame. It won't impede my enjoyment of the book. Like, it's not that important, because the important thing is all of the other things that are happening. And to have a space opera murder mystery and neither the space travel nor the actual murders be the most interesting part of a book says everything, I think, about Tay Thompson's amazing writing style. I cannot tell you how glad I am that I have the Wormwood trilogy ready to go, because if this is what he can do with the standalone, I am so excited to see what he does with the Wormwood trilogy. Now this might all change. I might read the second half of the book and be like, oh, okay, whatever. But at the moment, the discussions that are being had and the way it's being written and the fact that I really do want to keep reading, I just don't have the time, it's incredible. It's such an incredible book. and I am really glad that the spinner wheel made me read this, because I don't prioritize sci-fi anywhere as much as I should, so I'm really glad that I am now forced to read this. I will hopefully read the latter half of this tomorrow. I am out in the morning. We're going to the science museum. My kids are having the day off school, so it'll be my kids, myself and my husband, my cousin and her husband, and their kids. So there's going to be 6 kids, 4 adults, but it's going to be great, and I'm really excited for it. It's going to be a lovely day, but obviously we're going to be out for most of the day, so this is probably going to not get read until nighttime, and I'll have to do a midnight check-in again like I'm doing today. But after that, I do have basically no plans for the weekend. We're having a really chill weekend, so hopefully I will be able to like pick some more stuff off the shelves and actually spin the wheel, maybe like even once a day. That would be really cool. So we'll see how it goes. Hey vlog, it's Friday morning, so I figured I would check in. I have, in fact, finished Far From the Light of Heaven by Tate Thompson. I feel so sad that I have been reading less this week because I was so excited for literally everything that is in this wheel. But again, it's still Friday, so we still have Friday, Saturday and Sunday, and I'm going to try and read a book a day over the weekend. That's the hope. So first of all, final concluding thoughts on Far From the Light of Heaven. 5 stars. I absolutely loved this book. The amount of commentary that is in here. We have environmentalism, classism, corporate greed, the way that the legal system works, and segregationism or at least othering of people who are not like you. In a way we see a lot in sci-fi, but not necessarily one that is done in this manner. And there were just so many conversations being had in this book that I absolutely adored. The result of the mystery I also found to, because it was so discussion centric, I also found to be super important. I think a lot of the time whenever we talk about murder, it's always framed as inherently wrong, and there's a very little conversation about the moral ambiguity unless it's revenge. And I think in light of recent events, and you are starting to question the morality of murder for whatever reason, this could potentially be a really good book for you. It was fantastic. I need to read everything Tate Thompson has written, and 5 stars. Absolutely impeccable. After that, I now need to go spin my wheel again to see what I'm going to be reading next. All right. And we ended up on series. Okay, there are only 2 series in here, and that's why there's only one of those. We'll see, because they're both duologies. What did we get? Oh, God. All right, we've got Great Cities by N.K. Jemisin. For our third spin, we ended up with Great Cities duology by N.K. Jemisin. Now, if any of you have watched any of my videos, you'll know that I keep putting this series off because this is the last series by N.K. Jemisin I have left to read. I have this series and I have How Long Till Black Future Month left to read by this author. That's all I have. I keep putting this off because I don't want to run out of Jemisin. But it's time. It is time to read them. We have The City We Became and the World We Make. This first book is about the awakening of New York City. Every city has a soul, and as the city reaches a certain point, it then comes alive. And the city up until this point has, and it is how New York is awakening. And then we have this monster that is trying to bring it down, I think. Every great city has a soul. Some are ancient as myths. Others are as new and destructive as children. New York, she's got 6. And all 6 can be called to arms in the greatest battle the city has ever fought. Because yes, there's one for each borough. I am really excited for it. I think I'm going to love it because I've loved everything else I've read by Jemison. I'm just petrified. But yeah, we have these 2. So hopefully I can read this one today and this one tomorrow. They're not very long. So here's hoping I can make that work. It has 434 pages, which is a lot to read in one day, but I'm hoping I can do it, or at least finish it tomorrow morning. And then this one is a bit shorter. This one is 352 pages. So nearly 800 pages to read over 2 days, which is a lot. But hopefully, I haven't got anything else to do. I'm not doing literally anything else. I'm playing a bit of Tiny Tina's tonight with my husband, and that's all I'm doing. So I'm hoping I can really knock these out the park because I need to. I need to make myself read them. So yes, we've got a 5-star read, a 5-star read, and then hopefully another 2 5-star reads. This could literally be the best reading week I've ever had in my life. Good evening, vlog. It's not that late, but I've gotten into like comfy clothes and stuff for the day, and I figured I would check in while I'm up here, and I have now gotten halfway into the city we became, which puts me, actually I'm a little bit past it. I'm on page 226, which puts me on chapter 9. I'm really intrigued by this and curious about it, but I'm not in love with it, which is weird for me to say about Jemison because I've loved everything that she's written. And it's not that I don't love what she's writing. I love her writing style. It always feels so nice on my brain. At least this first half is establishing all of the boroughs and the characters and how the souls of different cities kind of work. There are certain cities that nearly got a soul and then lost it, and so many things like that, which is absolutely fascinating. I am really, really loving that aspect of it. However, my issue, which was the thing that made me a little bit hesitant about picking this series up, is that I'm not fussed about New York City. I know that a lot of people love New York City. I understand what it is on a global cultural scale, blah, blah, blah. I do. I understand why people love New York. I don't give a flying fuck about New York. I really don't. I went as a child. I have really fond memories. I went when I was like 5 and I remember things, and I remember being amazed as a child. My parents, whenever they talk about it, it's lovely, but I don't care about New York City. It's one of those where it's like, if a movie is set in New York, I kind of feel like I need to roll my eyes. So many things. It's like New York, London, and Paris. I don't care. I lived 45 minutes away from London by train when I lived in England, and I went around London a couple times, maybe. I prefer Brighton. Paris, again, I'm glad I've been. I don't need to go again. I feel like there are so many incredibly interesting cities that we never, ever set books or films in, because Tokyo, London, Paris, New York. So I don't care about New York. Now, I think that N.K. Jemisin is doing a really good job. I don't know. I'm not from New York. I don't know how good of an inspiration this is. But N.K. Jemisin is from New York, so I'm going to take her word for it. We have very interesting collection of characters, and they are representing the boroughs in a way that doesn't feel stereotypical, but does feel apt, which I'm really liking. So I'm liking the way that the souls is working. I'm liking the way that the world is working. I'm really liking the kind of hybrid type of urban fantasy that we've got going on. That's about it. Like, so all of the stuff that Jemison has put in, I'm loving. But all of the New Yorkiness, I'm just not fussed about. It's an ode to New York. This series is definitely an ode to New York, and that's awesome. But I don't give a fuck about New York. And again, not in like a I hate New York. It's so overdone. And like, there are so many cities in the world that I would rather read about. Like, why can't we have something set in, I don't know, like Lisbon or something? No one gives a shit about Lisbon. No one makes movies about Lisbon. I love Lisbon. It's beautiful. You know, just, yeah. Like, even capital cities, it doesn't even need to be like really obscure cities. Like, Lisbon is the capital of Portugal. And I don't think I've read a book that's set in Lisbon. You know, Rome, sure, yeah. even Madrid, you know, because I'm in Spain. I've read Spanish authors. Madrid, okay, Barcelona. But there are so many cities in the world that I want books set in that aren't. And so then whenever I read about New York or Paris or London, it just kind of is like, why? I appreciate them. I really do. I understand why everyone is obsessed with them. You know, they're big metropolis as well, blah, blah, blah. I get it. I do. Don't come at me. I understand. And I think this is a really good representation of it. It's really interesting. I just don't, I'm not connecting with it as much as I would like to. I'm loving the writing. I'm loving the interpretations of the characters. I'm not 100% sure even what the plot is yet. I'd rather this level of detail and intricacy go into a less known city, or at least less overdone city. I don't know. It's just me at the moment. I'm sure by the end of it, I'm still going to love this book because it's Jemison and she can do no wrong for me. But I just wish I cared more about the city in question since it's our protagonist. So that's where I'm at with this. I'm going to hopefully go finish this up, and I'll check back in once I am done. And hopefully my feelings will have changed slightly by the time we finish. Hey vlog, it's the next morning. It is Saturday morning. So begins my actually relaxing weekend. I have finished The City We Became. I've given this 4 stars. I ran it through Corpal because I genuinely didn't know how to rate this book. Because everything that Jemison put in here, I really did like. The characters, the way that they are they are as just individual characters, and then on top of that, the way they are linked to the boroughs, I thought was fantastic. I really liked the intricacies of the plot. This is one that I think with Jemison, you should pretty much always go in blind. So I'm not going to talk too much about the plot, which kind of defeats the object really of doing a vlog, but hey ho. The villain, I wasn't sure of. I wasn't really a fan of the villain. I think because Jemison very rarely writes like villains, like outright villains, you know, there's normally more to it than that. And I'm not saying this is like a more haha kind of villain, but she doesn't normally write villains at all. She writes really fucked up people. So I wasn't a fan of the villain. And as I said, I don't care about New York City. So there were 2 things that were really, really pulling this down. But then the writing is amazing, the characterization, the magic, the way that all of it is woven. There's so many things in here that are amazing that would be 5 stars. And I didn't know how to balance the 2. So I literally ran it through Corpal and it's come out at 4 stars. Not 4.5, 4 stars, which is low for a Jemison. I think I've only rated one of her other books 4 stars, which was the first book in the Inheritance trilogy, because that's her debut, and there were a few things that were a little bit rough around the edges there, but like even then the next 2 books are 5 stars. Not my favorite Jemison by a long stretch, but still amazing. But I don't really know. The thing is that I will always tell you to pick up Jemison. Like, if the synopsis of the book sounds good to you, pick it up because she's amazing. I will also always tell you that Jemison's an acquired taste. Like, there are certain things about her writing, there are certain things about the way that she puts forth information that I understand isn't for everyone. I can absolutely adore everything that is clearly Jemison in here and still not love all of the elements of the book. So that's just kind of where I'm at the moment. I'm going to go pick up the sequel now, and we'll see if I like the sequel more, because as I said, with Inheritance, that was the case. Also, with this being the first series that she's written since Broken Earth, I can also understand that there will be a lot of pressure on her, because while she did obviously write 2 series before Broken Earth is the one that really propelled her into much more popularity. It garnered her both Nebula and Hugo Awards. She won both, I believe, for all 3 books in the Broken Earth series. So naturally, this being the first one that she's put out since that level of popularity also means that I think she really wanted to do something really innovative, and it is definitely that. It is very innovative and very unique in the way it talks about New York, and you can tell that she's from New York just because of the love that comes through, not so much just because she knows the names of boroughs and stuff. It was very compelling. I'm a bit on the fence of eldritch horror. There are some that I've loved, some that I've hated. This one definitely falls in like a eldritch urban fantasy instead of horror, but very fascinating. And yeah, I am very excited to continue the series. Like, I want to know what happens. I want to see these characters. There are just elements that are a little bit weaker than I would normally expect from a Jemison, but that's okay. So yeah, hopefully the next one will come out still being absolutely amazing, and I'll be a happy girl. So it's still Saturday, and I am now halfway through The World We Make. It is Saturday afternoon. I'm really liking so many things about these books. Like, again, I think the characters are absolutely fan-fucking-tastic. The way that we have so many social commentaries around each character, like each character brings forth a conversation, be it from, I mean, I don't want to spoil things. There is a character in here who is very clearly privileged right-wing white woman. And we also have like our main villain who is also somewhat an embodiment of privilege, of white woman, of privilege, but with trauma. Both of these women have trauma, and how it makes certain elements of prejudice understandable while still not justifiable. And I really appreciate that. I think that obviously as a society, so much of our prejudices are built in from negative experiences or from what we have been raised with. And so much of that is explained in here. So much of the characters and the characteristic of these characters is absolutely incredible, because it is about basically fighting the evil that we see in the world on a more deep-seated level. And I really, really do like that. I love the way that N.K. Jemisin is talking through those things and the conversations that can be had with every single POV and every single thing that is going on. That being said, as someone who is not that fussed about cities, it is still something that I am struggling with. Less in this one, in a way. I don't know if it's just because I've gotten used to it from the first book, or if because more and more things are happening in this one and we're seeing more of the different cities and the different ways that they are created, etc. And obviously there's the hope that we're going to get some kind of resolution here. So I do appreciate that, but there's still just that little tiny something that is kind of keeping me a little bit at arm's length. I'm still loving everything else, and I feel so conflicted about it, because I know that everything that is being put forth I love. I am not fond of the setting, and the setting is the principal thing. It's so central to the story. It's not something I can just overlook. Still have a little bit of mixed feelings, but for the most part this is just an incredible story that I am still really appreciating. So here's hoping that by the time I'm finished, the conclusion will have really, really pulled this through for me. And I have more thoughts on it, other than I love all of these things, and then there's these two couple of things that keep kind of pulling me in. Like the villain's a weird one. Like, so there are two characters that are currently affiliated. One who is the villain, and then you have one who has been like roped in by the villain, but it wouldn't have taken much. And like, I find the villain a little bit caricaturesque at times, and I appreciate what is trying to be done with the villain. Like, they are the kind of person that I would absolutely despise, but it doesn't mean, like, by this point with everything that they're doing, I would have liked more from the villain. The one that is affiliated with the villain, I'm finding really interesting. I don't know what it is about the villain that I'm just not vibing with. And like, obviously I'm not supposed to vibe with them like, yay, villain. They're despicable. And they're the kind of person that you'd see every day. They are everyday despicable, which are the most enthralling kind of villains, because they make you confront the things that you have to put up with every flipping day. And I love that. And I think that is powerful. But there's two, like the first book, it was too long for us to not have more from this character. But I don't know if that's just because I've recently read Toni Morrison, because one of the things that I really appreciate about Toni Morrison is that you'll have a villain and they're an outright villain, and at the same time you can understand why they're the villain. I don't think that's the case with this character. I don't think this character is supposed to be one that we understand why they're the villain, be like, oh yeah, I totally get it now. But at the same time, I want there to be more to them than just, I want to carry out this horrible deed and that's it. I don't know why exactly, because the commentary for the villain is brilliant, just not the character, which is weird. But maybe by the end of this, again, but the one that's affiliated with the villain, who is still quite villainous, but is acting like a victim, that is one that I'm finding really fascinating, and I'm really interested to see what the fallout from that will end up being. So hopefully I will have a much better time with the ending of this one, but I'm still having a fantastic time. I just feel really weird talking about this series. Hey vlog, so it's been a little while. It's now evening and it's nearly dinner time, so I thought I'd check in because I have been sat here for a hella long time and I've finished The World We Make. This one, there were elements actually in this one that I did genuinely like more than in book one, but there were also a couple of things from book one that I really didn't feel we got much of a resolution to, and some of the consequences of the things that happened in book one didn't really play out because we had such a big shift, I suppose. I did really like seeing the different cities. I did really like then seeing like the discussions around the defunct cities. This one had a lot more sci-fi in it, so there was much more like multiverse stuff, which is not normally my absolute favorite thing. I'm not really much of a time travel / multiverse kind of person, but I did really appreciate it, and I especially the conversations that were had around it. I just think that there were so many things in this series that even Jemison's writing really couldn't make me love. Obviously the first one being so central on New York, which I'm just not fussed about, and then this one having all the multiverse elements as well, and while super intelligently written and really well crafted, they're just tropes, elements, settings that I'm not fussed about, and they're too pivotal to the plot and characters for me to then not factor that in to my enjoyment. I've already been really critical of this series. It's a 4-star read for this one as well. It is what it is. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to talk about all the things that I really did appreciate about this series, because I feel like all of my vlog updates have been kind of like, there's a lot of things I'm not fussed about. I'm giving them 4 stars. It's not a bad series. It's a really good series, and therefore I feel like I've needed to say what I had issue with, because I myself was expecting these to be 5 stars because of how much I love Jemison. I felt like I needed to justify why I wouldn't give these 5 stars, but now I have done that. So I'm going to talk about all of the amazing things in this series. The first thing I want to talk about is the representation of the characters. Now, yes, they are boroughs, they are representing boroughs, and I really love how diverse she has crafted New York City to be, so that we can see the way that these boroughs are brought to life and the therefore diversity of New York City. I thought that was really well done. I think that while I still, by the end of it, did not like the villain. I didn't think that the villain was a good villain for the scope that we have. I did really appreciate what the villain represented, and I think that that's an important distinction. But as a character, the villain didn't feel very well rounded. As a concept, it was an incredibly important conversation. I really liked the conversations around privilege, rights, like human rights in general, around the way that trauma marks a person, the way that society shapes people based on their gender, based on their sexuality, based on their race, based on their upbringing, their class, their social standing, etc. I really did appreciate that. The strength of these characters is also all shown to be really different, and I feel also in keeping with their boroughs, which was awesome. Like, you have characters that are strong, they're quietly strong, characters that are resiliently strong, characters that are upfront with their strength. You had so many different depictions of why they would be the Avatar because of the kind of strength that they present and the kind of strength that would be needed within surviving those boroughs. So I really think that a lot of things were handled really well. I love the discussions around the cities, and they really did feel like an ode to cities as opposed to an archetyping, stereotyping of a city and its inhabitants, which I thought was fantastic as well. I think for the most part, there's so much about this story that I really did love and appreciated. It all comes through in Jemison's writing. The big key factor here being Jemison herself and her writing, and the way that she manages to craft all of these characters while still having a really important conversation through each and every one of them, through the villain, through the plot, through the world, the universe, the multiverses. So many important conversations were being had in this book on every page, all while still being a compelling story. At no point did I feel like the story or the characters were sacrificed for being a social critique aside from the villain. The villain is the only one that I felt their sole purpose was to be a social critique, which is fine. But when pitted against all of these really believable, really interesting characters, I just felt like the villain felt very much just like a concept as opposed to a person. That was my only critique in regards to the character work. Everything else was phenomenal. So fantastic series with so much to love. And again, not even like, oh, it's the worst Jemison for me. It's the worst for me because it's based on tropes and settings that are not of interest to me. So the fact that there's a multiverse story that I've given 4 stars, the fact that there's a story that literally centers New York City and I've given it 4 stars, actually says how good the books are as opposed to how not good they are. But yeah. Anyway, I had a wonderful time with them. I just, as an N.K. Jemisin fan, it was really conflicting for me to see all the stuff I love about Jemisin on the back of things that I don't normally enjoy. With that being said, we've got 2 5 stars, 2 4 stars. We'll go spin again for my final read for the vlog, and we'll see if I can split the difference and see if I get more 4 stars or more 5 stars in this vlog. Ooh, out of my comfort zone. Okay. Ooh, The Underground Railroad by Colson Whitehead. I might try watching the miniseries for this as well. And the last book then going on this TBR, the last book for this vlog is going to be The Underground Railroad by Colson Whitehead. This one is one that's been on my TBR for ages and I've been really excited to get to. And this is exactly the reason why I've done the spinner wheel, because I keep not reading books that I want to read because they're not coming up in the jars, because obviously I only pick a couple books out of the jar anyway. So this is going to be perfect. I'm really excited. This one is, I believe, following a young woman who was on a slave plantation and then manages to find a way onto the Underground Railroad. And the Underground Railroad in this one is a literal railroad that is underground, as opposed to literally just a system that was created to free slaves. I'm very excited to see how I feel about this, because it's about obviously freeing slaves. Don't think this one's very long. I think it's quite a short book, but I don't know what the font is like. All right, so it's 306 pages and the font is rather large, so we shouldn't have too much of an issue getting through this in just over a day if I actually do like I did today and just sit down and read for hours. I have like vlogs on in the background, which is really soothing to me because there's like a little bit of background noise and kind of drowns out all other noise. So I might do that again tomorrow. Hopefully we'll start this tonight, and then yeah, I think I'll get the bulk of it read tomorrow. I'm very excited. I've been dying to read Colson Whitehead, so I'm hoping this completely lives up to all of my hopes and expectations. Hey vlog, it's Sunday morning and I'm really sorry also about the lack of change of scenery with all of my kids home for the foreseeable future. It's just one of those things that I have less variety of places to film. This is the place that is least noisy and I just sit and relax and where I read. So you're going to see a lot more of me just sat here for the remainder of this vlog and obviously next week's vlog as well, because it's a school holiday. But I am here to check in because I am now 82 pages into The Underground Railroad by Colson Whitehead. The writing style in here is actually really powerful. It's definitely one of those that I feel it's got a mixture of being like straight to the point and telling you everything in a way that is not glamorizing anything. It's not trying to it's literally just doing it in the most authentic way it can. It's not trying to glamorize the trauma. It's not trying to push it as this sensationalized thing. It's not something that is there to be gratuitous. It is just literally highlighting what slaves endured. This is speculative fiction only in that it is alternate history, in the sense that the Underground Railroad is an actual railroad instead of a network like it was in history. So far followed multiple different perspectives, and they're all centering around this woman named Cora, who is a slave. She is descended from slaves. Her grandmother was brought over from Africa when she was a child, and then her mother disappeared, presumably ran away when Cora was a little girl, and has since never been seen or heard from again. We've followed it so far. We got a little bit of a story on Ajari, who was Cora's grandmother, and kind of how she came to be on this particular plantation. The next section that we got was Cora while she is in Georgia on this plantation, and the next one was Ridgway, who is a slave catcher, i.e. like a slave specific bounty hunter. We got his perspective mostly on how he ended up becoming a slave catcher. So far, I mean the story of Cora, and therefore learning the layers of society that you are in. You have obviously the distinction between the different classes, between the owners of plantations, the workers on plantations, and the slaves on plantations. But then even then, like the hierarchy, for example, within the slaves and things like that. There's a lot of very harrowing depictions in here, which you would obviously expect from slave narrative. As I said, it doesn't shy away from them, but it doesn't glamorize them either. They're very matter of fact, which can be harrowing in its own right. I am very excited to see where this book is going to go. At the minute, I'm not 100% sure. I know obviously where it's going to go other than Cora's attempt at liberation. With how matter of fact this book is as well, I don't know if that means that Cora is going to escape in the end or not. I actually don't know the extent of it. So I'm very excited to see how I end up feeling about it. I feel like there's so much that I want to see, and we don't have that much left because it's such a short book. So I'm very curious to see how Colson Whitehead handles this book in general. So I'm going to go sit here now for a bit and try and read another decent chunk, maybe get to around the 200 page mark, and then maybe check back in. That would be quite nice. And yeah, we'll see how I'm faring with it, because at the moment I'm really loving it, but I'm mostly curious, and I really want to keep going. And I was reading it while I was around my kids yesterday, and they were being kids, so there were constant interruptions, and I was a bit like, I really just want to read the book, actually. So I put it down and then picked it up once they went to bed and had a better time. Hopefully I can do something similar again today and just sit here and read without distractions. Hey vlog, I am checking in again because I am now on page 199. There are definitely a lot more alternate history, borderline speculative elements in this latest part that I have read. There were definitely some really interesting conversations around societal Puritanism. It was handled in a really interesting way. We've had some developments on some of the characters and the way that different subcultures would have arisen in America during this time in the States. I really have been enjoying the conversations that Colson Whitehead is trying to have, because it's a story and it's very much presented as a story, and at no point are you kind of supposed to read into this is fact. But at the same time, the micro communities that he has made, be it from the group of slave catchers, the groups of slaves that we had in the beginning with Cora, the way that we now have like I said, this very Puritan society, the way that we have Underground Railroad community, all of these sub-communities in and of themselves, even though they are just presented as part of the story and that is it, are fantastic for fueling conversations around our society, around the way that different groups of people view other people and how we other people. And I really enjoyed that, because I really love it's along the same lines of conversation weaving as Octavia E. Butler does. It's a lot of kind of in a way what I saw from Tate Thompson as well. It's a lot of, I'm just gonna put this here and you do with that what you will. I find that R.F. Kuang, Becky Chambers, there are certain authors that are very much like, very blatantly, this is the conversation we're going to have. We are going to have this conversation. Colson Whitehead is more, I have given you food for thought. Do with that what you will. And I really love it when authors do that. Don't get me wrong, I love some heavy-handed stuff sometimes. I just love that it's out there in the world. And even if it's stuff that I know, like in Kaiki, we get it, or When Women Were Dragons, there are lots of books that are just like super heavy-handed with their themes. They're very much like, this is what I want to talk about. And I am not going to shy away from it, and I'm going to ham-fist it down your throat. I am A-okay with that. But I also really love it when authors are like, I'm not going to have a conversation with you. I'm going to plant a seed, and you can water that seed and see what plant grows from that. And I love it. I'm really enjoying the way he's going about that. So I'm really excited to continue. I'm going to go hopefully finish this tonight. I don't know if I'll check back in or not, or if I'll just do that in the morning, but I'm going to hopefully finish this tonight, and then I will let you know my final thoughts and rating, and then we'll wrap up this vlog. Hey vlog, it is Monday evening. It turns out that evenings at the moment are the only time where any one part of my house is actually quiet enough for you to be able to hear me. So here we are. I have finished The Underground Railroad. I finished this last night and I have given this like a tentative 5 stars. This is a weird one because this book, it did everything it set out to do. It created some fantastic conversations, some super important conversations, and it did it really, really well because, like I was saying in the previous clip, it really does a good job of like planting seeds for you instead of just like outright telling you what the author's views are. And I really loved that. But one of the things that I would really like to see more of when we're talking about slave narratives is when you have like slaves that are freed or escape, most of the time the story ends with the character or a different character or someone relevant going north towards the free states. And I just wish that because of the way Colson Whitehead discusses things and the way he goes about telling the story, I wish this book had been longer and we had actually investigated what that means, or that this book had a sequel where we could see what that means. That is what I wanted more of. So the book and its intentions are all 5 stars, but there's a tiny part of me that wishes that we had a bit more because it stayed in the same territory we often see and didn't explore further. But I had a wonderful time. I definitely am excited to read more by Colson Whitehead. I have one other book of his, so hopefully I will love that just as much as I loved this. But that's it for this vlog. So time to wrap it up. Our first spin was a out of my comfort zone spin, and I ended up with Love by Toni Morrison, which I gave 5 stars. My second spin was a within my comfort zone pick, and that was Far from the Light of Heaven by Tade Thompson, which I also gave 5 stars. My third spin was a series spin, and I ended up with The Great Cities Duology by N.K. Jemisin, which consists of The City We Became and The World We Make. And I ended up giving both installments 4 stars. And the final spin was once again an out of my comfort zone spin, and we got The Underground Railroad by Colson Whitehead, which is a 4.5 star rounded up to 5 stars. Overall, I would say an absolutely magnificent reading experience, and I am super glad to have read these. So yeah, let me know if you've read any of these books and your thoughts on them. Let me know if, based on my liking of these books, if you have any other recommendations for me. And that is all for me for today. So thank you ever so much for watching, and I'll hopefully catch you in another one soon.